Madam President, if you all don't mind, I'm going to get straight into our budget. I would like to present the proposed 2020 operating budget for the fiscal year July 1 of 2019 through June 30th of 2020. As you see in these books that are passed out to you, this is the actual proposed budget. Chaz, can you make sure that Ms. Kidd, as well as Mr. McDaniels, also receives one right now as well? Thank you. Madam President and Council, a few weeks back, I had the chance to visit with some residents in Central Park in the neighborhood. The purpose of that was to connect with them, engage them in conversation and hear some of their issues and receive some of the things they wanted to talk about. But while there, some things I saw with my own eyes disturbed me. I saw a lot of blighted structures, a lot of homes that were beyond repair. And it's not your usual home that's beyond repair. A lot of them were actually burned out. And I think the only thing that disturbed me more than that, and I shared this with Ms. Vicky, the president of Central Park, and some other people in that area, was that you had homes next to these burned out structures where children were living in them under the age of 6, literally outside on their porch playing. And in my mind, these structures are more than eyesores. No child should live next to a burned out structure in our city. They're hazards to our community and to the health and well-being of our residents. And so the next day I instructed city crews to take down those structures as soon as possible. Now in that vein, that is how I look at this budget. How do we continue to address neighborhood revitalization? I think for me it's important for people to hear me when I say this. We have a moral responsibility to ensure the safety of each and every resident of the city, from the youngest child to the elders of our communities. All 99 neighborhoods deserve our undivided attention, care, and resources. And so for this new fiscal year, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment in the life of our city. We know our priorities, and it still comes down to 2 words: neighborhood revitalization. It has been a fundamental cornerstone of our administration since day one, and that will not change, because our greatest asset is our people. From each and every resident to the 4,000 employees who work hard for their city every single day. We are here to serve them, to make sure our priorities align for the betterment of their lives. And I am committed as mayor to investing in and protecting our people. We know what we must do to strengthen our city. But for far too long, Madam President and Council, the habits and practices of business as usual when it comes to the city funds has overrun the needs of the people and overrun the needs of the neighborhoods. And so a year ago, we took the first steps of change. We created the Neighborhood Revitalization Fund to support the work our neighborhoods expect and deserve. We invested in our people with an increase in the city's contribution to our pension fund. We created a process to promote transparency in the work of our economic development efforts through requests for proposals. And we set aside dollars to maintain the basic equipment we use each day to serve the city. It was the first step, but this year we must make greater strides to do more than just enough. If year 1 of my administration was the catalyst for change, then year 2 is when we fulfill our potential. Again, this is indeed a pivotal year. Our finance team, led under the direction of Lester Smith, and let me take the time in this moment to say thank you to Lester, thank you to his entire financial team, thank you to members of my team, Kevin Moore and Chaz, Mitchell, and the entire team. I've spent more time on the first floor in the finance department over the last 6 weeks than I've spent in my own office on the 3rd floor. Our finance team projects $6.5 million in revenue growth for the new fiscal year. In addition, we are securing unrealized revenue through the code changes in the Department of Planning, Engineering, and Permits to align us with other municipalities for what is charged for commercial construction. We expect $3 million from these fees. This new fiscal year will also mean an estimated $1 million in additional revenue for the city from the state's recently approved gas tax. Altogether, Council, we project a budget of $451 million for the fiscal year of 2020. Again, that's $451 million for the fiscal year of 2020. Since taking office, my administration has adopted cost-saving measures to perform our basic city services in a more effective and efficient way. We have implemented a new focus on fiscal responsibility by targeting our obligations, investing in our people and equipment, and preparing for unseen challenges in the future. All of this must be done while maintaining a laser focus on our absolute priorities. And so we jump right into it. Neighborhood revitalization is the single most important work of this administration. In order to better serve our neighborhoods and our residents, we must remain focused on increasing our investment in our neighborhoods through street paving, pothole repairs, demolition of blighted structures, and smarter services. The operating budget I propose to you today will increase street paving this year for a total of $8 million. We have heard the calls of our residents to fix our roads and streets. These funds will go to address the City Council supported paving plan for all 9 districts. Let me be clear, we're going to pave our streets. Removing blight in our neighborhoods remains the most requested item I hear from the people of our city, and I dare say at least 1/4 of this council. This year we have invested in equipment to increase demolition of blighted structures with city crews while creating a coordinated effort with contractors throughout the city. We have removed more than 450 structures that are beyond repair since January of 2018. And we're committed to cleaning up and maintaining our neighborhoods through a nationally recognized weed abatement program. We have invested in new front loaders, brush and trash pickup through economic development investments deposited into the Neighborhood Revitalization Fund. Combined, we will invest $4.7 million this year in blight removal and weed abatement, and that is proposed to you today as well. $4.7 million, which is a $1.5 million increase in demolition from a year ago. We're going to remove blight because that is what our citizens deserve. In addition to that, Council, we will invest $500,000 in code enforcement technology designed to help our enforcement officers serve our residents more efficiently and effectively. I want to talk about something that's sensitive to all of us, and that's the land bank. I understand the frustration of the pace of the city's land bank authority. I share in that frustration. While it's a powerful tool in upholding the promise of neighborhood revitalization, we all agree the program has not moved with the speed in which we expect and need it to. And so this fiscal year, we will see a $1 million investment for the Land Bank Authority to work closely with the Jefferson County Circuit Court to fast-track clearance of titles on 200 delinquent properties. This effort will speed up the process so our residents can restore and repurpose properties sitting empty in their neighborhoods. Combined, these funds, Council, represent a total for $14.2 million dedicated to neighborhood revitalization. Again, that is $14.2 million that we are supporting and investing in neighborhood revitalization. In addition to that, the budget will reflect my commitment to return grocery stores and healthy food options to our communities. The City Council, thanks to you all, have already invested in and via support and vote of $500,000 to the Healthy Food Initiative. And incentives will be tied directly into the Neighborhood Revitalization Fund as we work to create a better day for all of our neighborhoods. This administration is committed to responsible stewardship of the city's funds and financial standings. I don't have to tell this council or remind you all over the last few months, our creditors have taken a hard look at us. Because as it relates to what the city is responsible for and the moral obligation we have to our employees, the truth is, for many, many years, the can has been kicked down the road. And we, as a combined mayor and council, are in no situation where we can kick the can down the road. We must meet our financial obligations. We must meet our moral obligations to invest in our employees. Because if we say our greatest asset is our people, then that includes our employees. In the last year, we have identified the massive neglect our pension system faces from nearly 2 decades of doing absolutely nothing. And so hear me clearly when I say this. We will not sit idle while our employees' future suffers. In addressing benefits for city employees, I had many choices. We could do what we've been doing for years, which is nothing, or we could take a stand. And so instead of kicking the can down the road, we decided at this moment in our city's history to do what others would not, which is focus on our pension. We must make decisions to take care of our employees today and long term. This is a commitment to fiscal responsibility, and it is absolutely a moral responsibility for our administration. So that starts with fully funding our annual obligation to the pension fund. I'm happy to announce to this council and to this public that the city of Birmingham, for the first time in many years, y'all, we will meet our ARC and we will fund the city's obligation in its entirety. This budget will reflect our commitment with an additional $5.8 million going to the city's contribution. This commitment, coupled with proposed cost savings from the pension board, will send the message that the city of Birmingham is committed to our employees and our financial standing. And so let me be clear again. We will fully fund our pension this year. As I said, we face many choices. In addition to increasing the contribution to the pension fund, this budget will provide longevity pay. In order to keep health care costs for our employees in check, we have increased the city's contribution to employee benefits by $3 million. But with these commitments, we must make tough choices. Combined with the merit-based raises, longevity pay, an increase in the city's contribution on employee health insurance, and a stronger pension system will protect our employees both today and in the future. As you can see, those investments total $13.9 million for our city employees. You know, I've often spoke about to you all individually what priorities were tied for first place. It wasn't a 1 or a 2, it was literally tied for first place. It was our pension and paving streets. And as you can see, this fiscal year reflects that with two of our biggest increases in this budget are meeting our financial and moral obligation to support and invest in our pension for our employees and $8 million for paving streets. And so with that, for the second year, we are putting money into a deferred maintenance program to maintain our equipment and efficiently serve the people of our city. In addition, information management services will modernize the city through Image Now. This $800,000 investment shifts the way the city does business. We want to move from mountains of paper to the digital age, providing an efficient, effective, and accountable government to our people. And as Police Chief Patrick Smith enters his second year of leadership at the Birmingham Police Department, my administration remains dedicated to providing what our officers need to serve and protect the people of our city. Already, Chief Smith has implemented system changes in the department to address crime. This budget will help modernize the department with the proposed $1.5 million investment in a real-time crime center. We believe this is the future of crime enforcement in our city. Officers won't drive blindly into a crime scene, but have the full support of technology to know the situation they face and to help them better solve crime. This is a commitment to make Birmingham's neighborhoods safer. This budget makes tough choices to support our priorities. For a second year, we have taken a hard look at vacant positions throughout the city. I think some of our senior members of this council, Madam President Abbott, our Pro Tem Councilor Parker, and Councilor Stephen Hoyt all know that we played a shell game in what's called surplus personnel. But has left the city choosing between city services and some other things that have not been taken care of. And so these are positions that represent a line item in our budget with no real service provided for our people. With the exception of police, fire, and public works, we will continue the reduction of these unfilled positions to create more funds to provide real services for the people of our city. I am pleased to share with you the next steps in making the Birmingham Promise a reality. This budget represents a $2 million investment in secondary and post-secondary workforce development, creating apprenticeships and real opportunities for our young people as they enter the job market. I am happy to say that I've spoken to many of you all about this individually, spoken to the superintendent about this, as well as spoken to individual school board members about this, spoken to even some of the union representation of the teachers unions, as well as PTA presidents who fully support this. The priorities we have set before members of the council acknowledge our shared priorities to neighborhood revitalization and fiscal responsibility. We want to emphasize our partnership between the mayor's office and the city council, and I will go into detail a little later. But to start off, I want to talk about what we want to double. You all submitted a proposed budget to us. We weren't able to get you everything we want, but we did get you something. We will double down on our collaboration. In addition to the nearly $500,000 in professional services and consultings you all will receive, I am committed to also giving you all an additional $900,000 in discretionary funds for the city council. That is $100,000 for each district. The truth is, Councilor Hoyt, Councilor Alexander, Councilor O'Quinn, Dr. O'Quinn, Madam President Abbott, Pro Tem Parker, Councilor Williams, and Councilor Woods, and in the absence of your two colleagues, Councilor Hilliard and Councilor Smitherman, you represent your districts and you know the issues in your districts. And so we want to encourage you to take these discretionary funds to further invest in your districts. This fall, we will come together as a city to make an important decision to hold a citywide vote to extend ad valorem taxes to support Birmingham City Schools. I want everyone to understand that these are not new taxes. Again, these are not new taxes, but a renewal of ad valorem taxes last approved by voters and residents of this city in 1991. This budget supports a referendum, which is an election to hold a citywide vote and special election for 3 council seats. Again, this is a pivotal moment for our city. It is a moment of change for our city when we commit to addressing the work of our residents, demand, and providing the fiscal responsibility we all have sworn to uphold. And this moment of change can only happen when both the mayor and the council unite for the good of our constituents. I want to encourage each of you to join me in supporting this budget for the good of our people and for the good of our city. A couple more points, Madam President. Chaz, you mind bringing this board for me? Counselors, in your booklet, if you can turn to page 29. On page 29, you see the mayor's proposed operating budget for fiscal year 2020 in the categories of revenue. So pretty much we get our revenue from real estate, ad valorem. We get our real estate from business taxes, permits, fines and fees, intergovernmental taxes, charges for service, and a few others. As you can see this year, our real estate was pretty flat. Ad valorem was flat. As a matter of fact, we probably dipped about $1 million. And everything else was pretty flat. Our permits were flat. Our fines and fees were flat. Intergovernmental fees were flat. The only two areas we saw increase were charges for services, which was a $3 million increase. And we saw our sales tax go up. So I want to break down these sales tax for a while. Break down these sales tax to you. Our sales tax increased by $4.9 million. Our use tax increased roughly around $350,000, but it's $348,494 to be exact. Our occupational tax saw a huge increase of $4 million. And we're proud that people want to do business in our city because our business license increased by $1.8 million. Combined with charges for services, which I told you was $3 million, and some other fees, that's revenue is increased. Lester, help me if I make sure I get my number right. Is that $10.5 million? Correct. That's a $10.5 million increase, council, this year in our revenue. That represents about a 2.4 increase in our total revenue from last fiscal year. So while that is something to celebrate, that is challenged by what I'm about to say. So as you see up here, it's $5.8 million increase for our pension. So we're fully meeting our ARC. There's $2 million in longevity pay. There's $3.1 million in healthcare costs, and that's $3 million in merit. That is a combined $13.9 million. That represents a 3.1 increase. So out the gate, just for this fiscal year, our revenue is a 2.1 increase, 2.4 increase. But our financial obligations to our employees is 3.1, which out the gate we're already upside down. Before you talk about operating, before you talk about basic city services, the contributions we have to give to our employees is already outpacing our revenue. And so that is why there are no sacred cows. That is why we had to look at how we engage surplus personnel different. Because if you did engage surplus personnel, you will have to look at how we provide our city services differently. And so that's the first point I wanted to make. Just to get to even, we would have to reduce our operating and services by $3.3 million, but that's with no space to do that. And so in addition to that, I want to talk about the mayor's budget. Publicly, I've said I'm not increasing my budget, but if you turn to page 35 in your book, I think it's page 35. Page 35. My mic went, oh, there it is. Page 35, as you can see, at a high level, eighth on this line is the mayor's budget. That is not an increase in personnel. That's not an increase in my people. The increase you see is from the pension benefits. The increase you see is from the grant match, and the increase you see is utility costs for the Negro Southern League Museum, as well as Tuscaloosa Avenue, which we've operated online now for utility costs. Services there include our peace and policy team. Also note, if you can turn to page 42 and page 43. Page 42 and 43 speaks to our city's debt services. Debt services, actually it's on page 44 as well. It's a total of $19.4 million. This $19.4 million represents about 5% of the city's budget. I want everybody to know none of that is new. I'm defining new as in that is not new debt that this administration has taken on. This $19.4 million is in the rears. That was already here prior to this administration starting. But by law and obligation, paying our debt services and our warrant issues, we're required to pay it. If you turn to page 41 and 42, you have redevelopment infrastructure incentives. That is a total of $7.3 million. Only $775,000 of this has been since our administration. And so we're still in the rears of paying prior $6+ million and paying back prior redevelopment infrastructure incentives. Madam President, if you bear with me, there are two more issues I want to speak to you about. The Birmingham Promise. If you can turn to page 38, you see under education. Thanks, man. You see under education, there's a line for the Board of Education and the Birmingham Promise. And so in the past, what we've had, prior administrations, they line item what was given to the school board. And then the prior administration, within that 7 years, I guess the last couple of years of their administration, they shifted to pretty much just a blank check at a certain amount, gave it to the school system, allowed them to do what they pleased with that money, as long as they reported to this council, which I understand they're going to report to you all tomorrow. But I think for us as an administration, and you all know my background as an advocate and champion for investing in our children, what we want to do in collection with this council, and believe it or not, after talking with the superintendent and the school board, and collection with them as well, is have a direct impact on students. And we want to make sure that the dollars we use from the city have a direct impact on students. And so you see here, instead of prior giving them just $3 million, this year we are shifting to $2 million to the Birmingham Promise and $1 million towards the school system. That $1 million will remain the way it is as far as allowing them to tell us how they want to use it. The $2 million with the Birmingham Promise, we've spoken to this, and I want to speak to it again. We have a situation, and it happens a lot. Young person in Birmingham City Schools walks across the stage. You had a young lady probably 2-3 years ago had a 4.0 valedictorian of her high school. But she made less than a 17 on the ACT. But let's just say she made an 18 on the ACT. She got into a public 2-year or 4-year college or university in the state of Alabama. And if she comes from the zip code 35212, is likely 35212, it's likely that she probably can't afford, or her parents or her home can't afford that tuition, even if she got in. Even if she got a Pell Grant, it wouldn't be enough to cover what she needed to be covered. And so what we want to do is make sure any high school student that walks across the stage of Birmingham City Schools don't have to face what that young person I described faced 2-3 years ago. That they can have an opportunity that will be supported with post-secondary opportunities. In addition to that, speaking with you all, speaking with the school board, speaking to the superintendent, speaking to employers in the city, speaking to the Birmingham Business Alliance, and speaking to everybody else in the space of dealing with workforce, it is past time as a city we commit to workforce development in the first place, and the best place to start is our youngest generation. And so to every young person that is a junior and a senior in Birmingham City Schools, whether they are on the Career Technical Education track, CTE, dual enrollment, co-op, career academy, or none of the above, we want to create, and this is based on our fact-finding trip you and I went to, Councilor Hilliard, the best robust apprenticeship program in the state of Alabama, I dare say in the Southeast. That if you are a Birmingham student that's a junior and senior, we will provide an apprenticeship for you, working with our employer clusters, making sure they agree to pay half of that young person's salary, and the city of Birmingham would pay half of that young person's salary. But this is something that we're talking about where young people can make $15 an hour, get the credit they need from the high school, and get the apprenticeship opportunity they need to be trained. We believe this is legacy for this entire city. We want this to exist well past this administration and this council, and this is a start and an investment of this $2 million into that. The last thing I want to talk about is directly related to this council. We've had many retreats. You all have shared with me your priorities. Each of you all, as a matter of fact, have detailed to me your top 3 priorities in each of your districts. And after listening to you, after talking with my team going back, I made it very clear. In an ideal world, we could address all 3 priorities for each city councilor. And we could find monies to reflect in this new budget that we're listening to you and want to invest in those priorities. And if we can't find all 3, if we can't financially find all 3, at a minimum you have to do 1. Best of worlds, it would be cool to get to 2. And so in District 1, Counselor, you spoke of greater police presence, you spoke of economic development, you spoke of paving. Well, in economic development, and this is not just to you, this is to the other counselors who spoke of economic development. I believe Councilor Parker spoke to economic development as it related to the Caraway site. I believe Councilor Hoyt spoke to economic development as it related to his entire district. we're putting an additional $1 million separate from the Boulder Fund. So last year we introduced the Boulder Fund to hold people who received economic tax dollars accountable, transparent process. We can track and measure how they spent that money and make sure there was a benefit in return to the city. We're going to continue to do that in this hand, but separately in this hand, and listening to you, we thought it was important to increase our economic incentive dollars. And so you saw on this board earlier that we currently have an output of 7.3 million. And in 17 months we've been here, our portion of that has only been 775,000. Well, what we believe, actually you had economic development interest as well. Let me not forget District 7. Development of retail space, I got you. This $1 million supports the requests of the counselors as it relates to making sure we're intentional. If we land some economic development, we have enough incentive dollars using a smart way, not in an irresponsible way, but to make sure we can land economic development in this city. Councilor Woods, you mentioned paving. Councilor Williams, you mentioned paving as a priority. Councilor Parker, you mentioned paving as a priority. Councilor Smitherman mentioned paving as a priority. Ms. Alexander, you mentioned paving as a priority. And that is why you see it reflected an increase. I'm not sure where that slide was, but that was a drastic increase in paving. The only disappointment I've had so far in this budget is that I couldn't get the 10 million. I wanted 10, but the pension said no. So we got to 8. Councilor Williams, you mentioned bank school, and you mentioned public works, a recycling program. I want to speak to that. Of course, you know we have a RFP process out, and we're working hard with banks. But we looked at banks as 2 options. Engage in redevelopment of it, or make sure it's not an eyesore in the form of removing it. And so we're working on option A, but we've increased our demolition monies if that doesn't work. District 4, Councilor Williams, Councilor Parker, you talked about demolition as well. We've increased funding for demolition. I think there were at least there was at least one other councilor that mentioned demolition. And so you've seen our increase by 1.5 million in demolition as well. Councilor O'Quinn, you spoke to Smithfield Community Revitalization Plan. That plan at this point doesn't require monies. You spoke to an update on the Tier Homeless Plan. That plan doesn't necessarily require monies right now. In Crestwood Quiet Zone, we're still having conversations with PEP about matching funding and seeing how that works out. Councilor Smitherman, in her absence, we again talked about street paving, lights and parks. I'm happy to say under the park board, working with Alabama Power in partnership, we're working to increase the lighting in District 6 and some additional things for parks. District 7, we spoke to the South Park projects, paving and sidewalks and development. Of course, in this budget, it reflects that. And Councilor Hoyt, additional funding for BRT, as well as economic development, sir. And then District 9, Councilor Hilliard, we spoke to the Ramsey McCormick, which you and I, we had a great conversation last week with some business owners and stakeholders and neighborhood leaders in that area last week. Wildland Library, which we're pleased to see, we kickstarted 2 weeks ago, and One Pratt Park will be open this year. And once that park opens, that'll probably be a minimum on the low end of $300,000 in operating expenses, which we've included in this budget. So how do we get to the additional $50,000 increase for each of you? If you all could turn to page 36, you see under Appropriations Code entitled Non-Departmental, Council Projects Districts 1 through Council Projects District 9. You see last year, everyone was hovering right at 50,000. And this year that is 100,000. So that's a $50,000 increase in discretionary monies. I want to tell you where that came from and why we made this choice. In our mind, this is a new council. 6 out of 9 people are new. But for the 3 veterans, I understand you all don't like to play politics and or hold the general fund budget, which is almost $500 million hostage over special projects or certain individual nonprofits, individual councils want to support with $15,000 here, $20,000 here, $5,000 here, $25,000 here. So we thought it was important, as you see on page 40 and 41, you see a lot of zeros, but as you also see, a lot of these projects are 10,000, 20,000, 15,000, some 50,000. Councilor Horde, I want to publicly tell you, we still support Party with a Purpose. But but you see a zero here, and here's why. If Councilor Alexander wanted to copy your idea, which is a great idea, she would want 50,000 from the general fund. If Darrell O'Quinn wanted to copy your Party with a Purpose, which we think is an amazing event, he would want 50,000. If each of you wanted 50,000, separate from your discretionary fund, separate from your individual projects, that would be 450,000. And so instead of doing that as a line item, we decided to increase your discretionary funding. Councilor Woods, District 1 is an example where you see Springville Road Library Resource. You see East Pinson Valley Rec Center. You see GPS. And you see a couple other individual items, 15,000 here, 10,000 here. Instead of doing that, what we wanted to do, if each councilor asked for these individual items, we wanted to give you, here's 50,000 additional discretionary money. You have a total of 100,000. You invest in the organizations you feel pleased to support, you feel empowered to support. The idea is for each counselor, you should be empowered to support whether it's a nonprofit or an agency in your district without necessarily putting those line items in the general fund budget and or using that as a negotiating tool. We wanted to elevate the conversation. And so in that regards, I want to publicly say we are not in a position to do both. We've cut departments so lean, any additional cutting, they would be close to anorexic. In addition to that, we feel this increase in discretionary money allows you the power to do what you need to support the individual organizations you want in your districts or citywide. And so in that regards, we think this is an extreme olive branch to this council with focusing on your priorities that you've outlined, and we put money in the budget, with focusing on the increasing the 50,000 in discretionary money. In addition to that, separate pot of money you have for your professional services and your consulting fees to hire however many lawyers and lobbyists you want. We believe this is a good budget, and the priorities haven't shifted, as you can see, with $14+ million towards neighborhood revitalization. I look forward to discussing and continuing to discuss this proposed budget with this council. And Madam President, that concludes my report.